Good morning everybody and welcome to Japan, where today we're going to reject the pressures put on us by the modern Western world and embrace our cultural heritage. Now I am become Weeb, the destroyer of worlds. To do so, we are only allowed to use traditional units and we can't advance our tech above level 1. This means that we won't get access to highly advanced things such as cannons or knees, and our entire economy will be based solely on mahjong. So, while our children won't grow up with black lung, they will have a crippling gambling addiction instead. Since we won't advance our tech above level 1, we will get less public order problems and our traditional units will cost less and perform better overall. And trust me, we are going to need every advantage we can possibly get our hands on. So, will we succeed on our quest to save the very soul of our nation, or will we be swept aside by the implacable advance of Western consumerism? To start things off, we chose the Aizu clan, which would give us a further boost to our traditional units and put us firmly on the side of the Shogun, who ironically had been in charge of opening up Japan to the Western powers in the first place. But we aren't going to let something as unimportant as historical accuracy stop us from coming up with a good video title. Anyway, we began our journey in the winter of 1864. Things were relatively calm and we had only one enemy to contend with, unless you're old, in that case you probably had two. Since the winter conditions would cause our forces to suffer attrition outside our territory no matter our age, we spent the first turns expanding our army with peasants armed with the ancient equivalent of the AK-47.
AK-47s for everyone!
They're not very flashy, but we only have to pay the peasants holding them with rice, and they are extremely adept at standing in packed lines in front of our more expensive samurai units, effectively protecting them from the hailstorm of bullets launched at us to further the machinations of our Western enemies. The strategy we were going for was one of pure, unbridled aggression. We were going to squeeze as much advantage out of our superior early game units as humanly possible. In other words, we were on the clock, and unless we wanted this to become an inspiration source to the 1910s Europe, we had some work to do. With spring having finally arrived, we set our plans into motion. The army had been expanded and we marched south to deal with our first enemy. While our enemies had a slight advantage in numbers, we had quality firmly on our side. Wanting to keep our momentum up, we immediately attacked their city, and just like that, we had doubled the lands under our control and gotten ourselves a big fat promotion from the Shogun. Bugyo! God, that's racist. Despite our early success, we couldn't afford to stop here, because like sharks, we had to keep moving or risk suffocating on Western ideals. Oh, that's so bad. We headed east to capture Hitachi Castle before our allies in the Yosai clan could get their grubby hands on it. Because even though we were allies and both of us were loyal to the Shogun, I don't have any illusions about being rewarded for my hard work. So I plan to make sure that I get a seat at the table, even if that means that I have to bring my own chair, if you catch my drift. This is also when I noticed that my daimyo was only 18 years old, but looked about 65. Times were harder back then, I guess. Anyway, having dealt with the first of many organic rebellions, we started looking for our next target. And being surrounded by clans loyal to the Shogun on all sides except for one, it wasn't a very hard decision to make. Numata, it's nothing personal, but we hate you, your lands, and your people. When we were about to capture their capital, however, it was suddenly swept away from under our noses. Our allies had just done to us what we had done to our allies. Nursing our first grudge, we turned south to deal with Edo. Having almost reached their capital, our enemies once again sallied out to face us in the field, which might not have been a very good move on their part, but I'm not gonna complain. Seeing no real reason to stop our advance westward, we take all of these, and suddenly we had, through the clever use of diplomacy and a truly masterful grip of the blade, won a short victory and all but defeated the forces of the Emperor without facing any real opposition whatsoever. We were the Shogun's chosen, but it all felt unearned. Our enemies hadn't stood a chance against our headlong advance, and at every point we had won without any real problems. So we did the only honorable thing and we started again. But this time we wouldn't just fight against Western colonialism. This time we weren't going to bow down before the Shogun or the Emperor. We were going for the clean sweep. This time they would bow down before me. The empire would be reorganized into the first Japanese Republic. Thinking that things would go pretty much as last time, I didn't really change our approach. We went in swinging, and almost immediately I realized that things wouldn't go the same way as last time. When our northern allies declared war on us, we had to divert all of their reinforcements meant to facilitate our southern push and instead send them north to deal with our treacherous neighbors. It was far from ideal, but at no point did I even consider the possibility that we wouldn't win a resounding victory. In my frankly enormous hubris, I thought that we could beat their much larger and better equipped force in a straight up fight. Oh no. And it turns out that this wasn't the case, and we lost our entire army in basically the first defeat that we had ever had. Thankfully, the several turns it took them to get from here to here meant that when they swarmed our walls, we could beat them back utilizing the ancient tactics of extreme violence. We had been redeemed. The thousands of dead peasants we left rotting in the middle of nowhere were forgotten. During all of that, our fearless leader had returned north to show our neighbors the error of their ways. But instead of using their superior firepower, they decided to ford this river, which meant that we could hold their entire army at bay with only one unit of samurai. Not a smart move on their part, but I'm not going to complain. So, with their army blocking off the nearby river with their bloating bodies, we conquered their cities and there was peace in our time. By which I mean I had to rush south again to defend my territories from Takayama, who had just killed one of my allies, and now had a direct route to my capital. As you can imagine, this made me more than a little nervous. So we sent our glorious leader to handle the situation. Speaking of handling the situation, having taken the territories of our conquered ally under our protection, it comes to our attention that a man in our court has been dealing with the Dutch. Oh no, not the Dutch. This just wouldn't do, so naturally we had him assassinated. With that done, we were in a position to enjoy the fruits of our labor. This didn't happen, however, because our allies were once again attacked and we had to save the day. The first army we ran into had no less than 5 units of cannons. Since the battle was hugely in my favor, I decided to out-resolve it in order to save some time. And while we did win, like the out-resolve said we would, it did cost us 2,244 people and 5 units to do it, which meant that our hopes of advancing were pretty much crushed, or should I say shot, exploded, and generally pretty much fucking dead. So we did a reload. Having loaded back in, our enemies land the first 600 or so shots before we get our hands on them and land the last 1400. On all accounts, it was a pretty great victory. With all the luck we had had lately, it was only natural that this is when it would run out. A full stack army appeared out of the fog of war and attacked our soft underbelly. I was pretty confident that we could hold. Yeah, no, we didn't hold. We got slaughtered to a man and it was fucking horrible. But our misfortune was short-lived because our enemy, in their overconfidence, decided to advance further into our territory, where we promptly killed all of them and then retook our city. So all in all, a lot of people just died for a whole load of nothing. Good times. With all of that done, we started to wage war on a truly epic scale. Jesus Christ, that is so violent. When tens of thousands of people had died, we had taken all of this and had finally earned enough fame to throw off the shackles of the Shogun and found the first Japanese Republic. As I suspected, the rest of the clans didn't like this very much, and in one fell swoop we had become the most hated person in all of Japan. Oh no, they really fucking hate me now, god. Everyone who wasn't already at war with us immediately broke all diplomatic relations and declared war. I had of course done extensive planning for this and prepared a very well thought out defense. Nope. Even though I knew this would eventually happen, our republic was woefully unprepared for a war on every front. And the fact that our lands were divided into 2 islands amid a sea of enemies didn't really help our situation. Having just lost every trade agreement we had, we were hemorrhaging money at an alarming rate. So when we liberated the city of Mikawa, we made sure to liberate some of their cash as well. With rebellions popping off throughout our great nations, invasion forces landing on our shores, and people generally being a nuisance, we had our work cut out for us. So we spent the next 5 hours or so defending our castles from constant assault by numerically superior enemies. After butchering tens of thousands of our enemies, there was a lull in the storm that was sent to wipe us the fuck out. So we left our castles and we went on the offensive. In the beginning of autumn 1869, we had consolidated our holdings and only a few pockets of organized resistance remained inside our borders. Sure, there were still rebellions every other turn and we didn't make any money, but we didn't let such trivial things stand in the way for our glorious plans. Having already captured Musashi, modern-day Tokyo, we only had to capture Kyoto in order to fulfill my totally arbitrary goals to proclaim myself the winner. This area of the map has seen some of the heaviest fighting in the game so far, and that wasn't about to change. Since we didn't know what forces they had, we decided to wait at a river crossing and take the city the next turn. This turned out being a very smart move on my part, because out of the shadows came a pretty scary looking army. But thanks to the river crossing, we could bottle them all up and wipe them out without much of a problem. With that done, we were faced with a dilemma. Two pretty scary armies were now threatening Ovari, one of our greatest recruitment centers. Do I move our army back and support the defenders, or do we press on and take our objective? Since the garrison was pretty stacked and we had already held off armies before, I decided to stay on target. If we could take Mino, we could hopefully block one of their ways into our territory. So we besieged the city and hoped that ours could hold out. Because if we didn't hold here, there was nothing to stop them for about 4 provinces and our entire economy would collapse. So naturally, I forgot to record the battle. Good job, me. After the battle, our economic investments started to pay dividends. We went from making 700 a turn to over 4,000. Since we were now making bank, I felt confident in assaulting Mino instead of just starving them out, because now we could actually afford to buy new units. With the city under our control and winter having arrived, we spent our time fending off an ever-increasing amount of attacks. Having survived the winter, we sent an expedition north to secure more money, a move that would prove to be rather unremarkable except for the fact that it was way faster to take all of these than taking these, which is slightly concerning. Anyway, having sent our expedition north to open up new Mahjong markets, Mino was attacked by no less than 8,400 soldiers, which was rather more than my own 1,300. The odds of us actually winning this fight was extremely low, but the more of them we could kill right now, the easier it would be to take it back in our inevitable counterattack. In the end, our brave defenders were drowned in the bodies of their 4,000 slayed foes. Losing the city was pretty bad for us, but we had managed to capture Ise, which meant that we now would have advanced warning of any armies coming from that direction. We then immediately launched our counterattack. With only 2,600 soldiers in our army, attacking a force of 7,000 seems like an incredibly bad idea, and that's just because it was. We did actually win the battle, but we lost so many soldiers doing it that we had to fall back again. Not really what I wanted, but having already made an incredibly risky move in attacking, I didn't have the balls to press my luck anymore. Also, Ovari was under siege by 2 big modern armies, and I had to break it if I wanted to replenish my army. Thankfully, the AI refused to line up their troops, and we destroyed them without much of a problem. With that done, we root out the last enemy holdouts on the south coast and send up a new army to help break the deadlock around Mino. We now had the better part of 3 armies in the area. So, did I bring all of these armies to bear on our enemies at once? Yeah, no. I sent in our fearless leader and used our peasants like a battering ram. It is safe to say that at this point I had started to lose interest. I had fought so many battles using nothing but swords, spears and a basic musket garrison that I just wanted to get my hands on some sweet cannons. But we had to remain strong. We had come too far to quit now. So, having retaken Mino yet again, we decided to check out the stats. Of 227 battles, we had won 203, which is pretty good. And while we had lost 151 units, which is roughly 30,000 soldiers, we had destroyed 1,468 of our enemy's units, which is a staggering 294,000. In other words, for every one of our fallen, we killed 9.7 of theirs, which is pretty fucking good. What was bad, however, was the fact that our enemies then launched their biggest attack yet. 8,345 soldiers were bearing down on Awari. There were so many soldiers on the map that the AI stopped working properly. But we managed to fend them off, and in the end they lost a staggering 5,900 soldiers while we only lost 1,900. Thank God, I didn't actually believe we were gonna win that one. Jesus Christ. After that, we lost and regained Mino yet again and sent our first probing force into Omi, which meant that for the first time in about 20 turns we had made some actual progress towards our ultimate goal. Next, we fended off the remains of the mega army from before and launched our attack on Omi, which mostly consisted of us peppering the defenders full of arrows. Not a very complicated strategy, but it worked, and the only thing now standing between us and our completely arbitrary goal was a river crossing and the capital itself. Gentlemen, we were close. I could feel it in my bones. I have been playing this game for so long, and if I have to play it for one more day, I swear to God. With spring just around the corner, together with our ultimate victory, we made a very strange discovery. Some absolute maniac has laid a bunch of solid metal rails across the countryside, and on it rides one of these. Our enemies had invested into trains, smoke-belching beasts of mass transportation. If this caught on, the flood of enemy armies we had been facing would soon turn into a tsunami. So we did a quick hit and run on the Emperor's armies and advanced on Kyoto. Nothing was standing in our way. We swept aside the defenders, and in the spring of 1871 we proclaimed our victory. Central Japan was burning, the rebels clinging on to the old world order refused to surrender, and things were generally pretty shit. But we had achieved our goals, and if I had to play one more turn, I was going to commit Sudoku. So with that, I'd like to thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Also, if you want to see me do the same thing but with guns, let me know, because this game is fucking great. Peace!